All right. We are in the fourth style of communication. This is called assertive communication. So this is what we want to get to. This is our aim, our goal. This is the pinnacle of really where we want to go in communicating and representing ourselves to the world around us. And so just quickly as a recap, we have looked at three types of communication: passive, aggressive, and passive aggressive. So in our word counting, I said that passive is I don't count and you count. Aggressive is I count and you don't count. Passive aggressive is I count and I hide the fact that you don't count. And then assertive communication is I count and you count. So there's a great balance there and a healthy way to communicate when I count and you count. And so that is the pinnacle of the way we want to communicate. This is how we want to represent ourselves in the world around us. And I know from personal experience in addiction, we have learned to communicate a certain way, maybe from our family of origin, maybe out of necessity, maybe because addiction is life and death. We've had to hold ourselves in a certain way to survive. And so many of us are super passive and we go below the radar and the passive aggressive behaviors. And then for me, I was super aggressive, and it's just how I carried myself with this bravado, keeping people at a distance, really quick to react physically and aggressively, but it's all rooted in fear. And so the goal is that what we're rooted in will actually come out of us. And so if I'm rooted in fear, and that's the $1,000,000 question, is like we're horrible at self-assessment. So we really have to go through this process of recovery to identify what we're rooted in. And that's the real process of recovery, is just to kind of show us what we're rooted in, what our root system is coming out and the fruit of our mouths. And so for most of us, we'll find out that we're actually rooted in recovery. And I remember my early journey sitting through a lecture in recovery, and they're talking about fear and this concept. And I guess the Spirit of God opened my eyes to my true reality. And we see in recovery this guy, a cartoon figure, and it's called delusion. And so delusion is, he looks like in the cartoon, he's got flies coming out of his hair. He's got his shirt all ripped. His pants are half down. He's got no shoes on, but he's looking in the mirror and he sees himself in this tuxedo, all trim and tight and with a big smile on his face, and he's in delusion. And so I was actually jolted out of delusion, awakened to the fact that what I looked like, my whole foundation was built on fear. And in this class, I actually started laughing. I was the weird guy that was, surrounded by 15 other guys. And I'm just starting to laugh because I'm actually seeing my true self. And here I am, this tough guy, don't mess with me. And I'm like, it's all coming out of these roots of fear. Like, I'm a scared little boy and I'm acting like this tough dude all my life. And I was just faced with how hilarious that whole concept was, and I didn't even know that this was my reality. And so my prayer is that God reveals what we're all rooted in, and that's the goal of these types of communication. Is what's coming out of my mouth is actually where my roots are. So is this behavior that I can change? Can I modify? I don't believe that I can transform myself into being aggressive to being passive to being assertive. I don't think that if I could have done it, I would have done it before. I think that at some level, education and knowledge is great, but I have to have an experience outside of my power to be able to actually have this change in my life. And so I can go from aggressive to being assertive. I can go from passive to assertive. I can go from passive aggressive to assertive. So it's not to condemn somebody's communication style. It's not to go, see, you'll never change. You'll always be like this. You do all these good things, and then you stab people in the back and you gossip about them, or you flip over a table and rage. And it's like, this is something that I can't change. I don't want to be like this. So the education part is great. But what am I rooted in? What's the real problem? What's the root of my problem? And so that's what I need, the power of God to actually transform me. And so it could take you a year or 2 years. But I truly believe that God helps us to accumulate his spirit within us, and then it will come out of us. And so where there was anger and rage, now there's compassion and love. And so I don't know if you have the power to actually do that on your own and start implementing behaviors, because it's so ingrained in us. It's in our roots. So when something happens, boom, it just comes out of you. So I think that there is a process. And I think that God's grace can, hold us into a manner of being able to be presentable for the time being. And like he separates us from alcohol or drugs, he has that power to do it, to give us the ability to start to be transformed. So we have to rely heavily on his grace. So what we're going to look at is this form of communication that we want to ascertain. This is my pinnacle throughout a day. I know that I can achieve this pinnacle by maintaining my relationship with God on a daily basis. This isn't a one and done thing. This isn't about feeling better. This is about getting better. And I get better by putting my root system, by God transforming my root system and being powered by him. That's where I get my nutrition. That's where I get my life. That's where I get my flow from, and it flows out of me. So I have to do this on a daily basis, and then I can maintain the fruit of assertiveness. So even this morning, I'm down and I have a meeting in my basement, and the dog's barking and barking and barking. And I'm like, my wife is upstairs. She's not doing anything. Why is she letting the dog bark? And I'm like, I came upstairs and she's upstairs, and she had come downstairs and kind of yelled at the dog. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like no one's like taking care of anything. Like I have to do everything. And she's going to put the bark collar on the dog. And I went to grab it from her under the guise of, I'm trying to help you. And she goes, why would you grab that? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm being aggressive. Like, okay, so it's just coming out of me, and I really have to remain in the contact of God through his spirit, and that's the spirit of love, and that's the spirit of comfort. That's the spirit of joy. So these things can happen around me, and it actually shows me that I still have some contact with God to do, because I want the situation to be effective. I want to be assertive. I don't want to be aggressive. I don't want to be passive. But this is my daily reality of I have to be in contact with God. My job is to stay close to him. And the big book, it says, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it says our work is to stay close to God and do his work well. So I don't think it's all about doing this stuff so I look good. I think it's about being with God to be transformed, and his work is actually being salt and light to those around me. So I get to be different than I was. And so what comes out of me is actually a service to others, not a disservice, not aggression, not passivity, not passive aggressive, but actually a spirit of love and assertiveness. So this is what this form of communication looks like. Assertive communication is a style in which individuals clearly state their opinions and feelings and firmly advocate for their rights and needs without violating the rights of others. Assertive communication is born of high self-esteem. These individuals value themselves, their time, their emotional, spiritual, and physical needs, and are strong advocates for themselves while being very respectful of the rights of others. yeah, this is how I want to be. This is how I want to this is how I want my wife to look at me. This is how I want the world around me to look at me. When it says that we are born of high self-esteem, this comes out of my esteem. This is comes out of my self-esteem. We can have a low self-esteem, a high self-esteem, and what that actually is my true identity. How do I need myself to see myself to be okay? So I have to have the proper esteem and get my identity out of my relationship with God, my relationship of recovery, my connection to community. I have to be esteemed properly to be able to react properly, to be able to respond to the world around me in this manner, in this style of communicating. And so there's two forms of this, how we like to be seen. So it's a form of pride. So pride is what I need you to see, and self-esteem is what I need to see inside of me for me to be okay. And so this is actually me playing God. This is me being the director. I recovery has brought me into the right relationship, and has positioned me in the right way so that I get to be the child, I get to be the actor. God's job is the director, God's job is the father, God's job is the producer. I'm just get my script, and from that script from the director, it should be assertive. All right, assertive communicators will. This is what we will like to do. And we would state needs and wants clearly, appropriately, and respectfully, express feelings clearly, appropriately, and respectfully. So needs and feelings are stated clearly. Using I statements, that's a great thing to remember when you're communicating. Just use I statements. Um, Communicate respect for others. Listen well without interrupting. I know I struggle with that one. Feel in control of self. So not feeling out of control, not feeling like a adrenaline buzz, not feeling extra heated, that kind of thing. Not feeling disrespected, that kind of thing as well. Having good eye contact. Speak in a calm and clear tone of voice. I know for me, I personally have struggled with that because I get excited. I speak with my hands, and it can be perceived as aggressive. So there are people maybe like me where we actually have to be more aware of how we're communicating and how we're coming across, and really take that to our relationship with God and go like, here, I keep doing this. This person is reacting to me in this way, and I don't want to be seen like that. So God, would you guide me in this? We would have relaxed body posture. I remember one of my most powerful experiences with God in a time of prayer where I stood up in a church service and came forward, and people prayed for me. I remember feeling like I was like this my whole life. I was in a fighting stance. My shoulders were tense. My head was down, and I remember actually physically feeling like that. And while people were praying, I just could sense my body posture just sinking and feeling relaxed. And I was like, wow, what am I fighting? What have I been fighting my whole life? I've been fighting myself. Like, I'm not fighting anybody except myself. And so me being rooted in the Spirit of God has actually brought a whole new body posture, a whole new um, compression in my physical being. Feeling connected to others. Have you struggled in your life, and especially in addiction, about not fitting in and not being connected? The opposite of addiction really is connection to people, connection to community, connection to recovery, but ultimately being connected to God. When we're not connected, then that's where other forms of communication come out. Feeling competent and in control, not allowing others to abuse or manipulate us, standing up for our rights. The impact of a pattern of assertive communication is that we would feel connected to others, feel in control of our lives. We are able to mature because we address issues and problems as they arise. We create a respectful environment for others to grow and mature. It is amazing for somebody to, when there's tension in a room and somebody comes in that is super connected and has, a transformation into assertive communication, and they come in the room and they diffuse and relieve the tension of the room. Um, that's not always me. Very seldom, but there are guys in our lives that you're picturing right now, and you're like, man, they're like a referee, and it's an amazing quality to have in a person in your life. The assertive communicator will say, believe, or behave in ways that say, we are equally entitled to express ourselves respectfully to one another. I am confident about who I am. Most people that have a true identity rooted in their relationship with God are actually not defensive. They're not aggressive. They're not trying to prove themselves. I know that from personal experience, because that was really one of my woundings. I always felt like I had to prove myself. I felt like I never fit in. I wasn't confident in who I was at all, and I needed you to see me in a certain way for me to be okay. And I did that in an aggressive way. I realized that I have choices in my life, and I consider my options. I speak clearly, honestly, and to the point. Honesty is a big key in recovery, is just being honest about my condition. And I think that whenever honesty enters the stadium of your troubles and your difficulties, honesty, you might not be in the right, and you might have done some things even in the house, wherever you are in early recovery. But when I introduce honesty into the stadium, into the arena, it actually brings relief and comfort and acceptance from others. And so if I can practice honesty of like, hey, I don't have this perfectly. When I'm grabbing the collar from my wife and I'm like, I'm sorry, that was aggressive. I responded in an aggressive way. I apologize. I had an expectation. I felt like you didn't mean that. And I'm just being, I just honestly have a lot to work on. And so hopefully today, and I can treat you with respect and dignity, because I want to be confident in who I am. Honesty. I can't control others, but I can control myself. I am responsible for my reactions. My response is my responsibility. Have you ever been into that kind of situation where you're yelling at your partner and the phone rings, and you pick it up and you're like, yeah, hello, yeah, okay, thank you, bye, and then you get back to yelling? Like, I'm actually not as out of control as I think I am. There is always the ability. I think that if I'm catching it early enough, there's that ability to be like, okay, I need a timeout. I need some tools. I need to breathe. I have to implement these structures in my life so that I'm not redlining it all the time, if that makes sense. I have a high priority on having my rights respected. I have a responsibility of getting my needs met in a respectful manner. I respect the rights of others. Nobody owes me anything unless they've agreed to give it to me. I am 100% responsible for my own self, my happiness, my joy, because that's my responsibility of getting those things from my creator. My responsibility is going to God to be filled by him, be rooted in him. And I understand that that's a process. But when I'm honest, willing, and open to the community around me, then there's a lot more love and tolerance available to me. And with that, we will stop.